Okay, we are live now on YouTube. Good evening, everybody. My name is Ishan Sharma, and you're watching Caravan. Today, we are here to celebrate and remember a scholar who was a big time mentor to all of us at Caravan, and was a big influence on us when we were studying in Delhi University. She was the first scholar that we read on art history, so-called Mughal art history, when we were taught. Uh, Professor Catherine Escher, and I'll just read out an introduction that I wrote for a publication, but then we'll start with the event. Eminent art historian Catherine Escher, professor at the Department of Art History at the University of Minnesota, passed away at her residence in Minneapolis on April 14, 2023. Born in 1946, Escher was a stalwart in the field of South Asian art history. She devoted her life to researching and exploring South Asian art and architecture through her works. Kathy, as we all used to call her, received her PhD in art history from the University of Minnesota in 1984 on the patronage of Sher Shah Sur, a study of form and meaning in 16th century Indo-Islamic architecture. She later on went to become an assistant professor and later professor at the same university. She was married to Professor Frederick M. Escher, who passed away in 2021. Escher authored and edited several important books, including Delhi's Qutub Complex, the Minar, Mosque, and Mehroli, The Architecture of Mughal India, India Before Europe, which she co-authored with Cynthia Talbot, and Perceptions of South Asia's Visual Past, co-authored with Thomas Metcalfe. She also published and contributed numerous articles to various publications. She was known for her work on the Mughals, but also ventured into the territories of sub-imperial patronages, the Taj Mahal, water traditions in the South Asian landscape, the architecture of Lucknow, and Islamic art and the politics of Indian nationalism, among various other themes that she studied. She was also the chair of the American Institute of Indian Studies Center for Art and Archaeology for 2 terms. In her seminal work, Architecture of Mughal India, the New Cambridge History of India, she showed that many features that are often associated with the Mughals had antecedents in Delhi Sultanate, state patronage of Hindu temples, or the architectural use of organic imagery, use of red sandstone and white marble, the style of architecture, etc. Escher, in her last book, Delhi's Qutub Complex, the Minar, Mosque, and Mehroli, goes beyond Mehroli and Delhi to look at the afterlife of the iconic tower, that is Qutub Minar. In this book, also, she applied her characteristic method of looking at monuments in the context of their historical meaning and setting and environment, studying the architecture of the Ghurids in Afghanistan and then understanding the buildings created by them in Delhi. I met Professor Escher virtually on Zoom in 2020 on the same platform when we invited her to deliver a Caravan talk on Delhi's Qutub Complex. Apart from her being a much accomplished art historian, she was a very humble and kind human being. She was always very welcoming and willing to help all of us at Caravan. And we had the privilege of hosting her twice on our platform, and all of us were connected to her via email. Her works on art and architecture of Mughal India introduced us to the world of art history when we were students at Delhi University. She dedicated her life to studying and preserving the art and architecture of South Asia, and throughout her life, she made some remarkable and valuable contributions to the scholarship on South Asian art. She was persistent and very devoted to her work, and we'll get to know more about through the memories and incidents and anecdotes from her students and colleagues. When the Mughals are under attack in India, it is important to read and celebrate the works of Catherine E.B. Escher. And today we are going to remember and celebrate the legacy that she has left for all of us to learn from, to understand. So without further ado, we have our first speaker, Professor Eva Koch, joining us from Austria. Professor Koch, over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much. So I'm very happy to be able to take part in this meeting. And it was extremely sad for me to learn about the passing away of Cassie. She has been part of my scholarly life since we met. I'm trying to move the slide forward. It's not working. Yes. Can you see? Yeah. So, yeah, we met first in Delhi in 1976, and this was at the onset of a new wave of Western scholarship, which introduced new analytical approaches to the study of the Islamic arts and architecture of India. So, this were the Americans, Cassie, then Wayne Bagley, Anthony Welsh, whom you see here on the right side, and also the Italian Attilio Petruccioli. And later on came also Glenn D. Laurie and the Australian Michael Brandt. And there was also the Japanese Matsuo Ara, who surveyed the monuments of Delhi. Now, I had then arrived in India on the beginning of with my family, yeah, with what was to become a sojourn of 10 years to work on my doctoral dissertation on Mughal architecture. And since during all these years, Cassie, her husband, and their children, Tom and Alice, visited India repeatedly for longer research stays in their association with the American Institute of Indian Studies. Our common interest brought Cassie and me together. So you have here one photo of our fieldwork, and so we undertook very often explorations together, and quite memorable was a visit of Varanasi and still Benares, and from there we went on to Rotasphore in November 1981. So on the right side, you have a photo of Cassie with her son, Tom, who was then in about the age of our own sons. Yeah, a common link was our association with Dr. Yunus Jaffrey, and we met in our house and had lively discussions. So here you have a dinner party in December 1981, and Hiauddin Desai has passed away. Dr. Jaffrey, with whom I worked on Mughal texts, and Cassie and me, we both were meeting Dr. Jaffrey on a regular basis for the study of Persian documents in his hujra in Dr. Zakir Hussain College at Old Delhi. Yeah, this place really became a meeting point for many scholars. And here's Cassie with and Rick, her husband, with Professor Ara, and we met last with Dr. Jaffrey in February 2016 on the occasion of the conference of acculturation, religious society, language in Fibachi College at Delhi. This was briefly before Dr. Jaffrey passed away. So throughout the years, Cassie and me kept in constant contact, and I much valued her seminal contribution to our field, her fairness and honesty in our exchanges, and her warm and humorous personality. Her death will leave a great lacuna in the studies of South Asian art, and culture. Really, one can say a luminary in our field is gone. Yeah, thank you. I have finished.
Thank you so much, Professor Koch. Professor Eaton, if you can unmute and share the screen.
Okay, I can unmute. Now I have to share the screen. I suddenly lost the share screen option. Let me see if I can find it again here. I had it, and then suddenly it it vanished. Here we go. I think I can get it now. Let me try this. Okay. Does that work?
Yes, you have to, I think, put it on full screen. Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, first of all, thank you so very much for inviting me to participate in this on this sad but also celebratory occasion. Kathy and I were great friends and colleagues for, I don't know, 45 years at least. And of course, we crossed paths repeatedly here in America, not only in Minnesota, where she taught, but also at the Madison conferences and many other occasions. But I want to just share a few memories that I have of Kathy in the field. And I want to perhaps focus on several dimensions of Kathy's life in the field that I was part of, that I witnessed, that I really think is worthy of sharing here. So first of all, going back to September of 1981, we crossed paths in Delhi, and here's Kathy as a tourist, en famille. You see there Rick, of course, Tom and Alice, also Tom and Barbara Metcalf, Carl Ernst. But we're just out there at the Qutub Minar, of course, which you see in the lower right-hand corner, enjoying Delhi. And that was great fun. But then there's Kathy as textual scholar. We also overlapped in Calcutta in the fall of 1981 when I was beginning my own research on Bengal. And so we both went down to the Asiatic Society of Bengal and shared some interesting discoveries working with Persian manuscripts in that institution. And that was great fun. Then from Calcutta, we both took trains, Kathy and Rick and her kids, from Calcutta to Patna in an unforgettable train trip, a long night trip. We finally reached Patna at night. And I remember Kathy and Rick organizing a caravan of cycle rickshaws from the Patna railway station to the Pataliputra Hotel. It was quite an event. The first rickshaw was Kathy and Rick. The second one was with Tom and Alice and some luggage. And the third cycle rickshaw was piled high with the rest of the luggage. It was quite an epic caravan. In Patna, Kathy and I worked at the famous Khota Bakhsh Library with the renowned Hassan Askari. He seems to have spent much of his life perched on one of the desks in the Khota Bakhsh Library, reading one of the hundreds of Persian manuscripts there. Kathy and I also worked in that library with Askari Saab, never very far away. But what especially stands out in my memory of that trip was going with Kathy and Askari Saab on a trip looking for Persian inscriptions in Patna. Now you have to know that Askari Saab is a native of Patna, probably had seen every Persian inscription there was in the state of Bihar. But on that, and so we went out looking for more inscriptions, kind of like kids going out on an Easter egg hunt. It was great fun. And Kathy discovered a new Persian inscription, or the old Persian inscription, I have to say, but it was new to anyone, that had never been seen even by Asghari Saab. And Kathy's great joy is what I remember at having herself found this Persian inscription, which even Asghari Saab never knew about. I don't know where she published it. I only remember her great joy and feeling of victory at having found this inscription. And okay, that was Patna. Then the other dimension of Kathy, of course, that I really treasure is how much she enjoyed sharing her knowledge of Mughal architecture, Indian architecture generally, of course. But here we see Kathy in full force in February of 2004. We had both invited to take part in a conference organized in the occasion of Professor Harbans Mukhia's retirement from JNU. And so as a side trip, we decided to go out and to Humayun's tomb with Willie Dalrymple and Najaf Haider and their wives. And I just love this photograph because you can see how quickly Kathy has transformed herself into art history guide. And you see how happy she is in this role. And of course, how intently her friends are following her in this in-person guide to Humayun's tomb. And here we see a few moments later, we are, Kathy is both tourist and guide. We're all lined up there in front of the tomb. I'm standing there on the far left on this occasion. But the last photograph I want to share with you is one that I really treasure, because here we see Kathy doing what she and Rick really enjoyed most. This is the foundation, of course, of both of their careers, which is primary fieldwork research. On this occasion, Kathy and Rick had flown to Dhaka, where I was already doing my own research, and the three of us took a taxi cab from Dhaka out to Sonargaon, which is a 14th century major urban center of the Bengal Sultanate. And so here we are doing or here they are, I should say, doing some photographic work in one of the mosques in Sonargaon. I regret that Kathy is partly disguised behind Rick's camera, but it really doesn't matter. You get the point. Here are two of the greatest scholars, art history scholars I think in the field, certainly in the 20th century, 21st century too, doing what they really loved best. And you really see it in this photograph. And I feel privileged and lucky to have shared part of my own career with both Kathy and Rick. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Eaton. And the struggle with the Zoom reminded me of when we hosted Kathy for the first time. And I had to do 7 trial runs with Kathy to get her PowerPoint up on Zoom. So yeah, we had to meet her. So that was one of the occasions when I got to meet her 7 times in 2 days. So the next speaker is Dr. Riaz Latif. So you can unmute.
Okay, hello everyone, and thank you, Ishan. I think, like most of us here, I'm a little confounded about how to speak coherently about Kathy. So I've just jotted down a few things which I shall just ramble on. So, but let me begin by saying that the presence of very eminent scholars like Dr. Reba Koch and Professor Richard Eaton, I think that itself should serve as a measure for the esteem and love that Kathy commanded. So I think I should like to begin with that. And I see several of my old friends here, so after a long time, and I'm sure that they will have, they'll speak about Kathy way more eloquently than I will. And so, yes, we are all very familiar with Kathy's work and scholarship and her her range and her curiosity and her very engaging teaching abilities. And so, but cutting across all that, I just pause to reflect on what really defines her as a person, right? And to me, a few words they come to mind, like the perseverance, for instance, rigor, courage, right? Focus, sharp, almost wicked wit, right? And a very warm generosity. I think if you kind of combine all these, I think that kind of to a large extent kind of really explains what Kathy is all about. And so that is there. And no, I think it's her uncanny ability to form lasting relationship, like to bring us all together. I think as a cohort that we came with. So I think these things, remain with me as a person, as far as my kind of engagement and my relationship with Kathy is concerned. And the fact is that Ishan, who probably has had the least interaction here with Kathy, probably, and I think that that he feels incumbent upon himself to organize this event for Kathy. So that speaks volumes about it gives you a glimpse into how durably and effortlessly she could win everyone over, right? So that's Kathy for me in a way. And the little anecdotes about time spent with Kathy are many, but I don't think there's enough time to really recount all of them. And I'm sure, a lot of my dear friends here, will share some probably when they speak. But I'll just say one. There's an abiding lesson she gave me, which I shall share with you. And I think I would like to invoke here, because a lot of us are here from her students. So a lot of them know Professor Jane Blocker too. And I kind of invoke her because she told me an identical thing. And the thing is, oftentimes when Kathy will be reading our stuff or writing and grading and so on and so forth. Most importantly, writing tirelessly endless recommendation letters for us, right? So a couple of times, during our conversation, I would say that no, this is thank you so much and so on and so forth. And how can I ever repay you for all that you're doing? And I'm sure a lot of us kind of had conversations like that with her. And in a quintessential Kathy manner, that comes a reply. Said, I know how you can repay me. And this is what she said. And I still remember it distinctly, so I'll quote her now. That no, if I have truly given you something, pass it on in a more than equal measure to others and ask them to do the same. And Jane had told me something similar, so I said I should really mention that, basically, right? So this is these are little nuggets which kind of remain with me. Of course, apart from all the formal education that we got from her and so on and so forth, but Kathy as a person. And finally, before I end, even though we have kind of gathered here for Kathy, but I can't help but mention that just around the days of Kathy's departure, until 24th of April, at least 3 other eminent scholars who attached to Islamic studies in one or the other way, right? They all have passed away. Jere Bacharach, Cornel Fleischer, and Robert Oosterhout. So Fleischer for Ottoman studies and Oosterhout on the cusp of Byzantium and Islam, basically, right? And the reason I mention this is because I know that because I know from Kathy that these 3 were Kathy's esteemed peers and friends. Yes, because I have met them through Kathy. And it is uncanny that they all should pass away within a gap of around 15 days. Right. So and I think I feel that Kathy would have liked that I remember them here too. And in the same vein, I cannot disassociate the memory of Professor M.A. Dhaki and Dr. Ziauddin Desai, who were responsible for introducing me to Kathy. So they figure, in my memories, certainly, and above everyone else. How can you speak of Kathy without our dear, majestic Rick Asher? Right? Because to all of us, I think they came as a package deal. It's always, right? So with Kathy and Rick. So I think I'm certain that Kathy is in good company up there. And because as I wrote earlier, I mean, in a little piece that I wrote for her, I said that maybe she was impatient to migrate to a more generous, more charitable dimension now that her Mughals had been crudely expelled from the annals of history. So I think she needs to be in a better place now, right? But she is here for all of us, and impeccably dressed as usual. The best shawls you could ever see with Kathy. And probably she's still mischievously winking at all of us, lest we forget that the immensity of the legacies that she leaves behind, that we need to kind of carry it responsibly. So that's all I have to say. Thank you so much. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Riyaz Saab. Deborah, if you can unmute yourself.
All right, can you hear me? Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much for arranging this tribute to Kathy. And it's wonderful to see all those old photographs of her and to hear everyone's thoughts. And it's an honor to be amongst this group and to be given a chance to publicly express how much Kathy meant to me on both a personal and a professional level. Like Riyaz said, I think that for many of us, when I sat down to think about what I wanted to say, I found myself at a loss, perhaps because she meant so much and still means so much to me. I couldn't quite think about what to say. So I thought, do I tell a funny anecdote, maybe from one of our times at conferences, especially if a speaker went way over their allotted time, if anyone has ever sat near Kathy when that happened. Or from our travels in India. I still remember one time when I was a graduate student, we were with Kathy in Lucknow, and this just insane torrential monsoon downpour came out of nowhere. And she was so determined to finish her field research that she just put a plastic bag over her head, another over the camera, and kept going. And we kind of like cluelessly, clamored after her. Or from one of the many dinners at Rick and Kathy's home, for like my now husband, then boyfriend, Dunfer, you might remember this, would always sneak food to Socks, their dog. And Kathy would always catch him and just laugh and roll her eyes. Or do I talk about the first time I met her 29 years ago when she picked me up at the Minneapolis airport when I was trying to decide about graduate school? And she was so welcoming to me on that very first visit. And as clueless as I was at that time, I was smart enough to realize that it was under her tutelage was my best chance to get through graduate school because of her generosity and kindness. Do I talk about the importance of her scholarship to the field, or talk about how her undergraduate teaching, her inspiring lectures and creative assignments shaped so many of us who worked as her teaching assistants and went on to teach our own undergraduate survey classes on South Asian and Islamic art history? Do I try to express how foundational she was to my career, or how she modeled what it meant to be a teacher, scholar, and a member of the South Asian art history community? I just wasn't sure. There's so much to say. Well, if you pick one thing, does it leave out all these other ways that she was so important? But I think in the end, what I decided that I really want to say and stress is that I think Kathy was ahead of her time in understanding the social responsibility that we have as art historians. Now in the US, at least, it's a big thing to talk about that social responsibility, but I think that was there with her from the first time I met her onwards, that we have a responsibility, not just to do excellent scholarly work grounded in extensive field research, but to preserve histories that might otherwise be lost, to highlight the ways in which India's history doesn't fall neatly into sectarian divisions, to use our scholarship to promote the diversity of the human experience, to celebrate it, and to push back against polemic views of the past that mischaracterize or even seek to erase Muslim history and heritage. That's our duty, but it has to be done based in solid research to have those stories come out. And I think she was really dedicated that from the moment I met her right up until the end. And so that's, I think, more than my own personal memories, that's what I really want to convey to everyone today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Deborah. Jennifer, if you can unmute yourself and.
Thank you so much for giving us this opportunity to share some things about Kathy. I actually typed what I'm going to say because I would never be able to talk about her without losing it. So, and I timed it to make sure it was 5 minutes because Kathy would want that. And when I see the names and faces here, it just is so like she's glaringly missing, you know, like these are her people. And I just want to see her in one of these squares. Kathy was an exceptional person in every way. And it's heartwarming to hear how much she meant to all of you as well. She shaped who I am, not only academically, but personally as well. And I'm beyond grateful that I was fortunate enough to have her as my advisor and mentor in grad school. And I feel especially blessed that she became a dear friend of more than 30 years. I first met Kathy as an undergrad at the University of Minnesota in 1990. During the first week of classes, due to some last-minute schedule changes that sophomores make, I was desperately searching for a class that met at 9:30 on Tuesday and Thursday mornings. Kathy's Art of India class was one of the few available, and it sounded marginally better than chemistry or sociology. As it turned out, I was quite taken with the class on the first day. Kathy's enthusiasm for every sculpture, every painting and building was contagious, and her exuberant retelling of stories, such as the Kalilawa Dimna, with different voices for each character, was captivating. Even in a dark classroom early in the morning for a college student, I was wide awake and completely engaged. It was around that time that I changed my degree path from architecture to art history. Because of her, I learned that I was much more interested in how buildings reflect and shape their cultural and socio-political environs than in designing them. This is in no small part due to Kathy. I'm certain that she is 100% responsible. And this was all because I needed a class Tuesdays and Thursdays at 9:30. Well, I was well aware that Kathy was a brilliant scholar, having studied with her and read her numerous publications. I didn't realize that she was considered kind of an academic rock star until my second year of grad school. As many of you may remember, Kathy and Rick hosted the 1996 ICSA Symposium at the University of Minnesota. And a few of the visiting grad students from other universities were in awe of her, nervous to meet her, and asking me numerous questions about what it was like to work with her. She was a phenomenal advisor. She had an all-encompassing sense of curiosity and inquiry, and she was extremely supportive, patient, and generous with her time, knowledge, and advice. Kathy was also fun, witty, and a delight to spend time with. Although our bi-monthly lunches stopped abruptly when the pandemic began, I'm grateful that I was able to visit her more frequently over these past few months. We talked about everything from new academic publications, novels, and what she was binging on Acorn TV, to her grandchildren's latest activities, Francesca's theatrical performances, Fergus's first time going to sleepaway camp, and the pictures Emmy drew when she visited. And sometimes there was Tres Leches cake and wine. In typical Kathy fashion, she remained upbeat and engaged in life and scholarship, despite her failing body. When I visited her, what turned out to be 2 days before she died, I could see that she was declining and having considerable difficulty breathing, but she was talking about the book we read for our book club and how much she liked it and was looking forward to discussing that. She was also concerned, she told me, to my surprise, about finishing a journal article she was writing. before she would have to enter hospice. The writing was mostly complete, but she still needed to add diacritics and clean up and format the notes. I convinced her to let me help. Unfortunately, she died before it could be finished. Knowing how much completing this last article meant to her, and because, like all of her work, it is original, thought-provoking, and a valuable contribution to scholarship, I'm thankful that the editor will still accept it for publication. The article considers Bundela, Sisodia, and Kachwaha temple patronage in their ancestral lands and beyond in relation to Akbar's policy of Sulay Kul, or universal peace, and it will be in the next issue of Muqarnas. Kathy and I texted frequently during the past few months, and she always ended her texts with a string of colored hearts, rainbows, and Om symbols, and I did the same. One time I happened to come across a GIF of spinning hearts. I texted it to her, and she said she really liked it. 3 different times that I saw her or texted her. Just yesterday, someone sent me a similar one, and my first thought was that Kathy would like it. I should send it to her. Our ongoing text thread is still on my phone, so how can she be gone? It goes without saying that this world will not be the same without her in it. However, I like to think that there is a next world, an afterlife, and that she and Rick are together researching things in that world that we cannot even imagine. That's it. I'm sorry.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. And I think it is pretty clear that she was very dedicated to the field of study, and we all look forward to host another academically inclined event to commemorate the legacy of Kathy once the article is out. And I think it's rare to have scholars like that anymore, unfortunately, especially in India, seeing the trend of research going down. I think it is on my generation of history students who are in their masters, planning to do their PhD, to learn something from the spirit that was Kathy Asher and Rick Asher, both of them who dedicated their entire lives to research and to South Asian art and architecture. We have another speaker, I think, Sinam, if you can unmute yourself.
Thank you, Sean, for organizing. It's so lovely to see everybody. I also didn't trust myself, so I wrote down a few things. I now teach in the Department of Art History at the University of Minnesota, so I have the amazing privilege to partly hold her position, sharing it with NSC Strand, who I think is in the audience here. I think a lot about how it is that I got so lucky to have met Kathy, to have become her student and eventually her friend and colleague. I come from Turkey. I actually had never heard of Kathy's name or read anything she wrote before I decided to apply to study in a graduate program in Islamic art history. I came across Kathy's name through the department's website. Under her profile, a lot of us will remember this. She had a lovely picture in which she was in the old slide room, known to many of us as the VRC. She was wearing a colorful silk scarf, as I remember it, and had the biggest, most genuine and welcoming smile as she was arranging her slides, probably for her next class. I wrote an email to her timidly, not really expecting to hear back, since I didn't want to study South Asian art. She responded immediately. She was enthusiastic as she answered my questions. She said I could actually meet someone from the department who was in Istanbul during her dissertation research. It was Nina Makareigdan Çoki, a former student of Kathy's from Austria, who was studying Ottoman bathhouses. When I met Nina on a rainy day in a little coffee shop in Kadıköy, she was very encouraging and so kind. I asked my questions as Kathy suggested and told her what I wanted to study, a topic really far from what I ended up with. What I didn't realize at the time was that it was a kind of interview. Looking back, it seems incredible that Kathy took me in. I don't know if I would take myself now, but she did. I truly believe this because I had majored in sociology and history in college and was finishing an MA in history in a program that focused on Ottoman and world history. The story of this beginning is pivotal in my life because had Kathy not answered me and had I not met Nina in Istanbul, I am convinced that my life would be completely different now. I am also proud to take part on this tight network of friendship and collegiality that characterizes Kathy and Rick's students. When I arrived in Minnesota, Nina was not there. Riaz, Venu, Aditi, and so many, I see Radha, so many of her students here also. Atreya, I think, is there, if I forget anyone. I'm sorry. And many others in the audience were there. It was partly thanks to their friendship and support that I was able to survive that first year as someone who had not a clue of what art history was. This group really opened my eyes. They were all friends, but also fierce critics of each other in seminars. That was something I had never experienced before, and I'm convinced that it has a lot to do with Kathy's and Rick's mentorship. Kathy taught me a lot. She was a wonderful teacher. That first year, I remember being so captivated and amazed by her lectures. She sometimes showed between 100 and 150 images, all of which she was heroically able to cover. She had a brilliant way of putting things in perspective. I think I was able to make the best sense of the material from Turkey in her classes. It took me a while to realize that what we saw in her classes were unique images that most other students would not have the privilege to see or study. As she discussed a monument, she told us many stories, sometimes about how difficult it was to even get there. That, for example, Rick told her there was just no way they could do it, but that she managed to convince a driver and then Rick himself, and they would get there, sometimes unclear on how they would be able to get back. And yet there she was teaching us that monument that few people had seen recently and perhaps no one had studied seriously before. She was very down to earth in a way that I had not encountered in any professor I knew before. I actually had a really hard time calling her Kathy, but everyone did, even undergraduates. I didn't know any professor until I met Kathy and Rick who put their home phone number on the syllabus. And Kathy had no patience for arrogance and no time. I've never heard her speak ill of anyone. The worst she would say would be to just ignore that kind of thing. I spent many hours in her office, sometimes bursting into tears. Many of her students will confirm this, I'm sure. In those moments, she couldn't help but cry too. She would say, "Oh, honey, don't cry," and give me a hug. Then she would come up with a solution and send me off filled with some or a lot of hope. Once I remember saying how difficult it was to deal with the abundance of Ottoman sources on one hand and on the other, the shortage of Safavid ones. I remember distinctly after we were both done weeping, she said, "Okay, no need to read all the boring Ottoman documents. Pick what's most interesting and useful." "And what about the Safavids?" I insisted. And she said, "You know, their archives have not survived." "Yes. And for that, we are infinitely grateful." I started laughing as tears were still rolling down my cheek. I'm really grateful to have known Kathy Asher and to have been trained by her. I'm grateful that Kathy taught me, Rick too, of course, by example, to work hard, to ask tough questions, and to never lose sight of what matters in life. Kathy will always be my role model as an excellent scholar, friend, and parent. I miss her deeply. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sena. Aditi, if you can unmute yourself.
Can you hear me? Okay. Thank you so much for having us, and organizing this event, Ehsan. And it was such a treat to hear Professor Gok and Professor Eden, especially seeing all those lovely photographs, and just seeing all my friends here and just hearing them speak. So I too have written out something, and hopefully I'll stay within the 5 minutes and Kathy won't be like wagging her finger at me. So this loss has been really surreal, heartbreaking, and devastating. I haven't fully come to terms with it, but as Jennifer mentioned, that's just learning that she was writing until the very end has been nothing short of inspirational. And as Riaz mentioned, and that this is also a really important and urgent tribute, especially as school textbooks in India get altered and Kathy's beloved Mughals disappear or are reframed in them. I, like others, were fortunate to have encountered Kathy's generosity. If it hadn't been for Kathy's swift response to my inquiry about studying with her, just like Sinem mentioned, she replied very quickly to my email, I would not be an art historian today. Kathy's research, writing, and teaching were deeply attentive to syncretic cultural traditions. She sought out moments of hope in our past when people from seemingly diverse religious and cultural affiliations came together to create something new. Kathy highlighted these moments of transformative visual encounter, whether it was Raja Man Singh building both temples and mosques in the Mughal visual idiom, or Abdul Rahim Khan commissioning illustrated Persian translations of the Mahabharata. Kathy's meticulous work shines a light on these many syncretic encounters. She did not need to explicitly say that these ideas had contemporary relevance. Anyone reading her work would find its significance for a violently divided world, gently embedded throughout her writing and indeed even in her teaching. And Rick and Kathy's Christmas tree, which I happened to see once, was decorated with ornaments from varying religious traditions. And I remember being quite intrigued by that one, the first time I saw that. And this was really reflective of this harmonious worldview that she wrote about and taught. At a fundamental level, Kathy's writing was engaged with, why royals and elites constructed architectural sites, or commissioned other works of art. She asked how patrons legitimized themselves in various forms of identity. Kathy was not looking at the visual form in isolation. She was invested in how people made meaning out of artworks, how individuals related to them. And as I was trying to think about how, she as a scholar and as a person influenced me, I remembered that, my very first graduate school paper that I wrote for a seminar that Kathy taught, which was on the arts of the Arab world, which was a comparative essay, I still remember, about 2 13th century queens and their architectural patronage. And I explaining why their life histories were central to understanding how and why they chose to build. And I think back and think, okay, why was that my very first paper? And that was probably because of, Kathy's guidance. I continue to see this legacy, in my own work, where I'm currently even thinking about how people relate to and shape architectural spaces, even in my current work. Kathy's mentoring encouraged us to question what we thought we knew, to always be curious, to learn and grow, to question established definitions and power structures. Her teaching modeled for me the expansive world of materials we could use as evidence. She showed to a young graduate student that it was possible to discuss the film The Battle of Algiers in an introductory class on Islamic art that began with the Dome of the Rock and it could end with the Battle of Algiers. It made that world possible for me. And in which she used the film to talk about how French colonial rule transformed the urban scape of the city of Algiers. Perhaps it is not curious then that I looked to 1950s films to discuss architecture and nation building in my own research, and looked to thinking about how British colonialism transformed landscaping and other transformation around Islamic architecture. From Kathy and Rick too, I must mention, I learned not just how to write histories of art, but also what kind of academic and person I could be. They opened up this world for me that I could be generous, I could be empathetic and rigorous at the same time. That generosity, empathy, and rigor could coexist, and teaching went beyond sharing academic knowledge into passing on life skills, creating a nurturing community for students, and being a role model. And on a lighter note, as all of our students and colleagues will know, Kathy loved a good joke. So I'll just share one instance where it was a joke at my expense. So it was in August 2007, and Kathy, Rick, and my fellow graduate students, Shugato and Atre is, I think, here. We were on a trip together across North India. We were in Varanasi, I believe, and we were in a very kind of fancy hotel. And we were going to have dinner, and Rick and Kathy learned just then that I just cannot have really spicy food. Like I'm not able to have very chili food. And they found that extremely hilarious. And they took great pleasure, Kathy particularly, by pulling my leg and revealing to the wait staff that, look here, this is this brown person from India, and she cannot have any chili food. She cannot handle it. And be sure not to put any chilies in her food. But you can put any amount of chili in my food because we can handle it. So she was really like pulling my leg at that time. And the twinkle in her eye and the gentle laughter is an image that I will cherish always. So Kathy, I miss you. Whenever I find myself in troubled waters, I will remind myself of your energy, your dedication, and your lightness of being. And remember that I must persevere because my work must honor you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aditi. Venu sir, if you can unmute, and thank you to you for helping me set up this event. Over to you.
Okay. I'm also struggling because I think it's been quite difficult. And I think it came slowly. It didn't come immediately. I think just slowly it's just become very difficult to actually coherently say anything. And I've tried writing down something. I might actually try and also intersperse that with some memories, and I hope it makes sense. But I think this is how things have sort of been coming to me. And I just want to say that I miss Kathy. And I also find it difficult speaking about her. I mean, how do you speak about a teacher who is never entirely distant from their students, right? I don't know. I mean, if this sounds too incredible, but sometimes I find that there's a deep sense of an unbroken continuity between Kathy's curiosity and that of her students, right? And it's uncanny. I mean, and maybe I'm biased, maybe it's because I'm her student, but I swear I sometimes feel when I'm noting down my own questions in my writing, I sometimes think she's the one raising them in the first place. And so between the student and the teacher, there's this indissoluble continuity that reigns, right? And so the teacher opens within me a sense of curiosity, and this sense of curiosity is familiar to me in a matter of speaking. I know this curiosity, it's my own curiosity, and yet it is differentiated from me. It escapes me because it comes from Kathy. I mean, the endless, versions of writing that she'd go through, the drafts that she'd go through, and I think like I've literally picked up how I pause and think on so many fronts from the way in which he's actually instructed me. But it's also the case that I've actually witnessed this in her later years when she'd come to Delhi, right? So I left the US in 2011, and Rick and Kathy sort of drove over to my house in Minneapolis while I was leaving, and Kathy was crying about my decision to leave. And for some time after returning to India, I actually thought I'd not see them again, right? And then again, over the next few years, I ended up spending more time with Kathy than I ever did as a student in Minneapolis, right? I've traveled to so many places in Delhi with her. She was writing her book on Meroli, and there again, I think her sense of curiosity. So she'd always keep telling me, and I actually have this habit of actually using a lot of my thinking and putting that before my writing, right? And so she'd keep reminding me that you need to actually place your material in front of yourself first. And then you need to enter into that material and just see where it takes you, which is precisely what seems to have been happening with the entire Meroli project. I think I remember going to all these obscure sites, and I don't think she knew exactly what her book was going to look like at that stage. But she'd just go and she'd hire this car, and I'd sort of come in for the ride, and we'd go to all of these locations. And I wasn't sure, where this was going. But I think eventually I did see the book, and I read the book and actually got my students read the book. And then you realize that this is what was happening as you're traveling with her. She's actually thinking, she's seeing all this, she's absorbing all this material, and this is where it was going. And so this idea that material itself is going to take you places, right? I think that's something which I observed in real time. And then also kind of retrospectively began to understand when I actually read the book that came out of that experience of, the kind of journey she was making. And so I'll just say that about the city of Delhi, where I'm at, and for all those who are from the city, I'll tell you this: that Kathy saw more in this city than many of us ever do, and many of us have ever done. And this city of Delhi, it's a very unusual place. It's got surfaces, forms, ridges, hills, streams, mosques, temples. There's so many objects here. And to name any one of these objects amounts to suppressing 3/4 of a sense of all the other objects here, right? So how do you find a way of seeing this place, the city of Delhi, without your eyes becoming suppressants, right? And that's the art of seeing like Kathy, right? It's more like she actually inhabits this 3/4 of the city which we don't see. I mean, every time you travel with her, you'd see things that you aren't seeing as a part of the city, as as a person from the city. So I think we sort of need to take this idea of becoming curious like Kathy to begin to discover this world which seems very familiar to us. And I think today it just so happens that in this country we're suppressing 3/4 of a sense of all that we are, right? And by naming ourselves in a very particular way. So we need more eyes like Kathy's to see ourselves afresh and to see more in ourselves than we see by ourselves, right? I think people might know what I'm trying to refer to. So I'll stop at that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Now I'll just ask other people in the audience if they wish to say anything before we conclude the session. They can either unmute or raise hand. The Janice wish to say. Janice, over to you if you can unmute.
It's really simple. Thank you all for speaking today, for all of us, and particularly for remembering that we see better when we see together. I think Kathy would have appreciated the sentiments that have come out here about the ways in which we learn. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Radha.
I just wanted to echo the sentiments that have already been expressed today, but I think I speak for all my wonderful colleagues who trained with Rick and Kathy both, but Kathy in particular, that we would not be where we are today had it not been for them. And they were very, very special people. And it is now up to us to continue their legacy in this discipline and beyond it.
Thank you so much, Radha. Great. So I think we are done with the speakers. Thank you so much, Professor Eaton and Professor Koch, for taking out time to speak about your experiences with Kathy and Rick. And I never had a conversation with Rick I remember during one of those trial sessions, Rick was just passing and she said, this is my husband, Rick, and we have to go for an appointment at the doctor. So, you better be quick and set up my Zoom. So that was my only interaction with Rick. But of course, through their works, they are going to be around for many, many years. And the students who are going to teach us, who are teaching us, our generation, are going to pass on the legacy of both Kathy and Rick to all of us, and maybe we can carry it forward, hopefully, to the future, because the situation in India, especially with the Mughals, is quite alarming, and it is time that we understand, as she worked on the Jaipur, on the city of Jaipur, where she said that the idea of the city of Jaipur was much influenced by the Mughal emperor Akbar Sulekul. So these are ideas that needs to be promoted in public, and we have been trying to do something like that through our works, somehow online. And one of the reasons that we carried on Caravan is the appreciation we got from Kathy. After the talk, I messaged her saying, "Ma'am, if you could just write 2 words about your experience on Caravan," and she wrote about a paragraph of how she felt, and that was the first word of appreciation we got for Caravan, and that's how we decided that we'll continue our work. And thanks to Kathy for being so humble to us at Caravan, for agreeing every time we used to write her. And the last time I wrote to her was during the 3rd wave of COVID, I think mid of last year, and to check on her and to know how she was feeling after Rick's departure. So I think there's so much to say, and I think in the coming months we'll all gather again to do another symposium of kind to celebrate the legacy once the article is out that we were talking. And we hope to have more academicians joining us to talk about the work, to analyze it, to see the implications of the new essay that she wrote. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you so much to all her students who agreed to speak. Janice, yes.
I'm sorry, I had just a coda, because you have brought up actually something really important to Kathy that wasn't fully highlighted here. And that's her work with Jain and Hindu temples. That's really important to also acknowledge, that it's a significant thing to demonstrate to all our students, these intertwined traditions. And she was very much somebody who did that in all ways with all of us. So it came out, but it didn't quite get as forefronted. That I think is the way to go forward with her memory. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Hee-Jun, would you like to say something?
Yes, yes. I mean, I put it on the chat window, but thank you for acknowledging Kathy's work on temples. I just wanted to say that my scholarship on 18th and 19th century Hindu temples would not have existed if it weren't for Kathy's scholarship. And I just remember, I mean, again, I wrote this on the chat window, but I just remember being so awed that she would agree to be on my dissertation committee and be my mentor. And I think she even cited my dissertation later in one of her articles, which just shows her generosity and mentorship. So I really hope that I can continue her legacy.
Thank you so much. And though I had the least encounters with Kathy, but the loss is very personal, and we all were shocked when we got the news. And I posted, is it real? I saw Venu's profile on Facebook just to confirm the news. It was so sudden for all of us. And though we never met in real life, I think that was the connection that she shared with a lot of people whom she met just once or twice or 7 times because of the trial runs. But we all miss Kathy, we all miss Rick, and I think we'll carry on the legacy through our works. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining in, and we will be back again. I'll just end the live.